Good evening and welcome to the ready to wrap up portion of the RO Sports Show, brought to you by RO Yellow, Richmond County's new online business directory. And we're starting off today's show with Richmond football offensive coordinator Brad Denson. Brad, we really appreciate you joining us. Now, we saw Dion let us know you put a post out. We'll start with this about how you've now been involved with 3 of the longest runs in Richmond County's history as far as on offense. What's it like to be a part of that in different capacities?
It's definitely in different capacities. I mean, you go back to '98, and those 2 backs with Rabbit and Marcus, two really good backs, and seeing it from the back end of it, and watching it develop, and then watching those guys go and watching the guys do what they do in front of them to set everything up was really good. And then Friday night, got the play called, and I looked at their alignment, and I said, boys, if this one guy doesn't make it, we got it. Mm-hmm. I said, this might go to the house. And I didn't think anything of the, 95. I didn't think anything of that, honestly. All I can remember was last week, I went for it, and we were, I think, on about the 4-yard line. I ended up giving up 2 points. Coach still wasn't real happy with me. But anyway, so I was like, we're running it out of here now. And just the way they aligned to it, I was like, we got a shot at this if we do what we're supposed to do. And literally as soon as the ball was snapped, I said, we got it. And let Jerron get a hold of it.
Happened that quick.
Get him out in the open field, and he can make some good things happen.
Let's talk about Friday. 33-0 victory, unfortunately cut short, but you guys put up a lot of offense in a short amount of time. Talk a minute about how you guys were able to accomplish that on Friday.
Those guys really work hard. The guys up front, I mean, they've come a long ways on the pass pro side of it. They've taken – they understand, I think, the weapons we've got, and they've really, dialed in on that. Coach McSween's done a great job with that. The guys on the outside between Coach Schuler and Coach Williams they've coached those cats up to really understand the passing game now. I think the 7-on-7s, a lot of that helped us this summer, competing with who we had to compete against. And, obviously Coach Jones with Caleb and Noah in the backfield, with the quarterbacks. They really do a really good job coaching those guys up and just sticking to a game plan. And, we felt like we had a good game plan going in, and they executed it pretty well. So take care of the football, and, I mean, we've got guys that can make plays. Just get it to them and kind of let them go.
Well, we definitely saw that. Caleb able to move the ball around quite a bit. Is that something you guys want to continue throughout the season, is spreading it out like that?
Well, no doubt. I mean, obviously, you got Dalton and Jacoby, but there are plenty of other guys out there who can make plays. I mean, you got several guys in the backfield between Jaheim, Jerron, Lasiris has not even been there that much. But then you look out there at the slot, and there's about 6 guys there that can really play. And skill guys you're not a skill guy if you're not greedy in some sense. You want the ball. You're a skill guy. You want the ball, and I want to keep all those guys happy. They all work extremely hard at practice. In the off season, that they've done what they needed to deserve an opportunity to get the ball also. And is that hard on my end to spread it around? Yes, it is. But at the same time, I think they all understand who really the go-to guys are. But they all want the ball, and I'm gonna get it to them as much as we can.
All right. You mentioned Jerron Coleman. All these guys at some point or another have been on JV, but I believe Jerron was on the JV squad last year. They also won their game this week. So talk about how important it is for those guys to continue refeeding this system, Coach Hope and his staff down there, to give you guys more playmakers year after year.
No doubt. Coach Hope, the job he does with that JV program is a tremendous job. You go around the state, and there's a lot of schools don't emphasize their JV program near as much as we do, and he's kind of the leader of that and does a really good job with it. Kids love him. So that's huge for us on Friday nights. We use them in a scout group. The defense takes the JV offense, offense takes the JV defense, and we don't beat up on them or anything like that. But and so they kind of get to see the speed of Friday night play, which in turn is going to help them on Thursday nights.
Right.
But at the same time, it kind of gets them prepared a little bit ahead of schedule, whereas they're only seeing Thursday night competition all year long. So it's a really good thing that what Coach Hope's doing, and keep bringing those guys along, and having them ready to play on a Friday night.
And last question, got Butler this week. That's always a tough competitor. A program that you guys know very well after playing them so many years.
Mm-hmm.
What have you guys been working on this week to get ready for them?
Just our game plan, what we want to do, execute, take care of the football. We know it's going to be a physical game. They've got extremely gifted players. They're extremely coached well. So we know it's going to be a battle for 4 quarters. That's kind of what I've been preaching to offensive guys. We haven't played 4 quarters yet. We didn't have to in week 1, and then obviously last week it was a true half. So that's the thing I've been kind of preaching to them. It's going to be a 4-quarter battle. Going to be a 4-quarter battle. We've got to make sure we're prepared for that. But I think we've had 2 good days of practice. We'll go out today and see how that goes, and hopefully it'll go well. I think they like the game plan, and we like it as a staff, and take care of the ball, and we'll see what happens.
All right. Hopefully
should be fun.
Hopefully pull out a victory. All right. Well, that's offensive coordinator Brad Denson. We really appreciate you joining us here on the wrap up. When we come back, Deion's going to join the desk. We're going to talk about all of the sports going on from the past week and what to look forward to coming up with your Raider sports. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Raider Wrap-Up. Of course, Deion Cranford joining us now. And, we just got through talking to offensive coordinator Brad Denson, gave us a lot of insight as to what they've been doing so far this year, what they're going to do coming up this week against Butler. But let's look back, talk about this Anson game. As we mentioned, unfortunately, only able to play 1 half, but the Raiders able to put up a lot of offense in that 1 half.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this last week. They're not getting to play much because they're scoring so fast. They actually scored on every offensive possession. So every time they had the ball, they scored. They only had the ball 5 times because it was just 1 half. So they ended up with a 33-0 victory. But just what I liked about it, and you can kind of look at this either way, but what I really liked about it is they really had a lot of yards to pick up each time they had the ball. It wasn't kind of like last week where they had 30 yards, 40 yards. I mean, they were having to actually go to distance on some of these possessions, and it didn't seem to faze them at all. So.
No, it definitely did not. Something here that I noticed you wrote down, Richmond's 40th all-time victory over Anson. They're 40-2 overall, and this is their 23rd consecutive win over Anson. What does that say about this? Can you call that a rivalry?
Well, I mean, it is a rivalry in the sense that it is a border battle.
Yeah.
The counties don't like each other in a rivalry spirit, I mean, and that a lot of people do show up to the game. I mean, Anson has really been a huge underdog in most of these matches, but still managed to pack the stands. Everybody came out to support the team. It's an exciting atmosphere. And it was good to see it back. I hate it ended the way it did, and we'll kind of see how they approach that game going forward in future seasons. But it was fun to see that game back on the schedule again.
Sure. Now, we talked to Coach Denson about this. I want to get your take on it, about how Caleb was able to spread the ball around so much in such a short amount of time. What do you think about that?
I mean,
business as usual.
Well, I mean, we say he was able to spread around so much. He only completed 6 passes.
That's
but
true.
He was 6 for 6, so he was 100%. But 3 different guys caught touchdown passes.
Yeah.
You can't ask for a much better scenario than that. Coach Denson was talking about how, during his years, he had those 2 guys get those long runs in '98. And, for me, that was kind of special because I was in school at that time and I was at those games. But, he pitched the ball out on those plays. He got the coach. And I did want to mention that was Michael Waddell and Marcus Ellerby that he was talking about on those. And to have those 2 guys on the same team, to have Brad Denson also on that team and have all that, just all that talent on that offense, it looks a lot like that this year. You're seeing all these names that people are learning, and the community's knowing these names, and they're learning these players, and they know what they're capable of. And to see Jerron Coleman, after we got to watch him last year, bust loose for that record-breaking 95-yard run, there is a lot of weapons on offense. But and again, we haven't really talked about defense, but defense has shut down their first 2 opponents as well. Hasn't given up a touchdown yet, and I'd like to see that continue as well.
Well, another thing Coach Denson mentioned with the matchup coming up this week against Butler is they're going to have to play 4 quarters, more than likely, unless something crazy happens. So what do you think they're going to expect to see from Butler this week?
I don't really know. Butler has had Butler's opponent last week was Mallard Creek. It's hard to read
Yes.
too much into that, especially with the schedule Mallard Creek's played so far. They started off with, I believe it was Dutch Fork in South Carolina. That one ended up in a stalemate because of the weather. It ended up tied. Mallard Creek pretty much owned Butler start to finish, but we've seen teams lose to Mallard Creek and then still be really, really, really good. So
Right.
it's so early, it's hard to tell. I will say this, though. I'm so used to Butler having all those big-name players, those names we hear and those names we know and those names that are repeated, and I haven't really heard a lot of that this year. So I'm kind of interested to see what they have. I think this year maybe Butler's the underdog and Richmond's the favorite to win it. So.
Well, I mean, with Butler, though, you could almost call this a rivalry game at this point, right? I mean, how long have we been playing Butler for now?
I mean, it's been several years. I think maybe back to 2009.
Yeah.
So it's been several years, and there was a gap in there where they didn't play. They've also had multiple postseason games. So
Right.
I mean, it definitely has been a rivalry. Butler's one of few teams that has played Richmond, more than 5 or 6 times and actually has a winning record against them. Butler actually holds the win. Actually has, I believe, 3 more wins over Richmond. So,
Right.
so Richmond's got some ground to gain.
Yeah, hopefully they can make up one of those this week. So let's talk about JV. I talked to Coach Denson a little bit about that, about how how important it is to have that feeder system. But they were also able to defeat Anson this week, 21-8. I mean, it's business. Again, I say business as usual. I mean, it feels like they haven't lost in forever.
Yeah. It's now 3.1 seasons, so they're rolling.
This one started off a little bit tighter, though.
Well, I was going to say, the end of the varsity game was strange. The beginning of this one was Richmond's, I believe, first 5 possessions was turnover on downs and 4 fumbles. Mm-hmm. So it took them a while to get going, but it looks like they really shifted Harley Honeycutt in that passing game. And I know I saw a little bit of that in practice last week, and we showed a little bit of footage of them practicing last week, that pass. And Harley was actually quite successful. He actually had a really good game. I have his stats. He was 10 of 16 for 213 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not bad for a JV quarterback. A lot of it came later in the game, but still pretty impressive.
Absolutely. That includes an 86-yard pass to Chandler Orr and 5 passes for 105 yards, 2 touchdowns for Javaris Stanback. Sounds like he's found some playmakers there on the JV squad.
He has, and I believe Honeycutt actually completed passes, to 6 different receivers in that game, so he's got some guys to throw to.
There you go. Although, real quick before we move forward, they're going to have to work on – actually, let me ask you this. Is working on turning over the ball, or actually rather not turning over the ball, is that just a matter of the fact that Coach Hope has to bring in basically a whole new set of players every year? Is that just, being the beginning of the season? What do you think?
I'm hoping this was a little bit sloppy early on. I'm hoping this is just the beginning of the season. Even though most of these guys have been playing a while, they haven't really been playing at this level. And people are saying, well, it's just JV, but that's still a higher level than most of these guys have played. And a lot of it's just ball handling, the way they're holding it when they're running, the way that. So, I mean, it's just a lot of that will get cleaned up. As far as their athletic ability, the way they played on the line, the way they played in the skill positions, I mean, I think they did really well. So.
All right. Well, from football to football, we're going to talk about soccer here. And unfortunately, soccer team has started out 0-3 so far this year. However, as you've written down here, their first 3 opponents this year have a combined 11-3 record. That's tough no matter who you are, right?
Well, it's not so much that, but all of those teams had played more games than Richmond. Richmond got a little rain-plagued and things at the beginning of the season. So, there's a little more experience. Plus, like you mentioned with those records, those were 3 really good programs. And it was a tough run for Richmond, but I think it's going to prepare them because all 3 of the teams they played, I can only think of one team in our conference that's better than them. So I think Richmond's pretty good shape going into conference play.
And, of course, with the hurricane and everything that's been involved with that, that is have to move some games around. So they'll actually get a couple of days off. But as far as moving forward for them, what do they need to work on to get on the winning side of things?
Well, I've only actually seen them a little bit this year, but what I've kind of observed, they're really having some I don't know, it's almost like ball control issues. They're getting the ball taken away from them quite, especially last night Tuesday night, against Porter Ridge. It just looked like they were really having trouble keeping up with it. The ball pretty much stayed around Richmond's net this whole second half. They've really got to get going offensively. They actually did a pretty good job defensively. There were a lot of shot on goals for Porter Ridge, and Richmond as a team really did a good job defending the net. They just need a little bit more offense and play a little bit more aggressively.
All right. Well, let's move from one net to another net, and that being on the volleyball court. And 5-1, they just picked up that first loss. Unfortunately, that's to rival Pinecrest. Big time matchup though. These are probably the best two teams in the conference, right?
Yeah, that was a fantastic just match all around. All of those sets were pretty close. They split the first two, and then the third one, Pinecrest took a huge lead, and Richmond just kept playing their way back into it. Got close. I think at one point they were down 10, but they got it about 22-20. But they just couldn't hold on and get over that hump and win it. And then the fourth match was about the same way. So they played pretty much toe-to-toe with Pinecrest in that entire match. They just came up a little bit short on those last two sets. But, I mean, you're talking about a few hits you're just talking about a couple of points here or there away from beating one of the better programs in the area. So I think they're looking pretty good. I mean, I think it was a good showing by Richmond, just came up a little bit short.
And, moving forward, you expect to pick up more wins, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think they'll do fine the rest of the way in the conference. I know Jack Britt's usually tough in volleyball, so we'll see kind of what they bring to the table. But I like the way Richmond looks right now. I got no complaints. They came up a little bit short, but they could definitely beat Pinecrest, and they showed it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's one of those matchups where, everybody wants to go undefeated. Very rarely does that happen. I feel like this is one of those times where, you lost, but you played well. You were in it the whole time. It's kind of part of the process, I guess is the way to put it.
It is. I tell you what, I don't know how these girls dig the way they dig, because you would think just slamming your body on the floor over and over and over again. But I tell you what, some of the digs especially, now they're good at the net, but some of the digs especially by this team, just really, really impressive. They're just getting under some hits that I just would never in a million years thought they could get under.
Yeah, by the way, Lane Malsby, 72 digs, 12 aces. So everybody seemed to have a great game, even with the loss.
Well, that's for the season. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But let's finish up and let's talk about golf, who has not started yet, but will start next week in Rayford at Bayonet at Puppy Creek. What do you expect to see on the links?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. We've got Haley back, Haley Miller, who I expect to see playing in states again. She should be one of the leaders of the conference. But everybody else is kind of we're really not going to know until we get that first golf match in. Hopefully, quite a few of those ninth graders have come back. Kyle, I think, has visited them a little bit, but I haven't had a chance to look at them because the weather. So we'll see. Because both times I went to see them, we had a weather issue. So we'll see how they look.
Yeah, it's a big difference between playing volleyball inside and playing golf outside.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Weather too much a factor when it seems to be outside sports. But that is your Raider wrap-up for this week, Dion. We appreciate it. We're going to take another break. When we come back, of course, Russell and I are going to bring you all of your NASCAR and racing news with Ross Racing right after this. The start of the Darlington Southern 500 was delayed Sunday night by 4 hours due to rain. The sold-out crowd of 47,000 stuck it out for the 10 p.m. start. Throughout the night, the Chip Ganassi duo of Kurt Busch and Kyle Larson were the alpha drivers, but as the race dipped into early Monday morning, it was Eric Jones trying to outrun Kyle Busch in the closing laps. With a mistake made by the 18, Jones took the checkered flag for his second win in his Cup career. Welcome back to the RO Sports Show. I'm Matt Harrelson. Alongside with me, of course, is Russell Parker. It's now time for our Ross Racing segment. So as we mentioned, the Jones boy, he beat his former mentor, Kyle Busch, to snag his second victory in his Cup career and second in 2 years. Big battle between these two at the track, too tough to tame.
Yeah, it really was. Unfortunately, I didn't get to stick it out for the whole race. I was really, really tired by that point, but I got to watch the closing laps here at the end when I got home. And wow, it was really an awesome battle. It was mentor versus, I guess, the apprentice, if you will. And the student beat the teacher at this point. And Eric Jones really put on a great show for that race and definitely proven himself to be worthy of that 20 ride right now.
Well, with the win, Jones now has a guaranteed spot into the playoffs, so that you could argue that he would make it regardless with just one race to go now. But what is the significance to winning a race this late in the season?
Well, it can do a lot of things. Of course, momentum, getting this late into the regular season, now entering the playoffs, playoffs, you got momentum on your side to at least carry you through that first round and maybe even more. And of course, getting those bonus playoff points to stick with you for every single round, it really helps out if you're having a bad day on one of these racetracks coming up. Say you have a really bad one at the Roval, that's the last race of his first cutoff round. And, I think that's going to help out tremendously for Jones moving forward because he's got those extra 5 bonus points there to help him out if he's going up against someone who doesn't have a win. And really it can help out because it moves you up a little bit into the point standings, which can also give you more bonus points. So overall, it definitely helps to get up there.
Well, Jones won't be losing any sleep heading into Indianapolis this week, but for the drivers on the playoff bubble, they'll be dreaming of making it into the round of 16 or having nightmares of missing out on a chance at winning this championship this season. As it currently sits, Clint Boyer is just 8 points above the cut line. Daniel Suarez and Ryan Newman are tied at 16th and 17th. The nod actually goes to Suarez for having a better finish in a race. Below them, at 18 under the cut line, is Jimmy Johnson. Now, Johnson had a strong race at Darlington right up until getting involved with a wreck. That leaves him with a bit of a hill to climb heading into the final race before the playoffs. Can Indy be enough to make it, though?
If he can hold on, he had a tremendous race at Darlington. I mean, he actually was going for the lead at some points. Unfortunately, got caught up in that wreck. But, if he can have a clean race at Indianapolis and even win it, which I think he can do that because he's won in the past. The Hendrick cars have always been pretty tremendous at Indianapolis in the past. Of course, going back to Jeff Gordon winning here at the Brickyard 400. But Jimmy Johnson, if he continues on the trend he's been going where he's having strong starts, but does get to close the deal, I think he can make it. It's going to be very tough. I think at this point, he does need to win or at least get solid top 10 finishes in the stage racing part of it, and then come off with another solid top 5 to maybe make it above those other guys. It also depends on how those drivers do because they could have successful days too, and it doesn't really make a dent in that difference. Or they could wreck out early perhaps, finish way back in the back, and not make up any stage points, and that could help out Johnson as well tremendously. But right now, it's going to be very difficult for Johnson to get it. But so is the other guys. They got to keep up their pace as well. And anybody's game at this point still, he needs a big track. We don't know how it's going to play out yet with his rules package. So I really do think we're going to have a bit of a wild card race coming up.
Well, obviously there's been a lot of speculation with Jimmy Johnson, whether he's getting too old for the sport, whether it's time for him to retire. But, of course, we've spent a lot of time talking about these last few spots in the playoffs. But do these guys at the bottom even have a realistic shot at making it to Homestead and racing for the title?
I think they do have. And realistically, yes, they have a potential spot. But can they make it? I don't know with the guys like Kyle Busch, Joe Logano, Kevin Harvick. Those guys are kind of just up there battling hard week in, week out. And I think you're going to continue to see that throughout the playoffs. If you win a race, you go into the next round. You got bonus points that can keep you moving through the rounds as well. But when you're at the bottom, you got a very big hill to climb. It's probably like a 90-degree hill to try and climb up, which is almost impossible. But they could potentially do it.
Well, with that being said, if they don't, then what's the point in even trying to make it into that last spot?
Well, a lot of things can happen. When you get into the playoffs, media coverage becomes big on you. No matter if you're 16th or first, you got a lot of media coverage coming up for you. And that helps out with your sponsorships and can generate more funding for your rides and having a better successful season next year. And it does measure how did you do this season. If you're carrying an attitude saying it don't matter, we're only going to be 16th, we're going to get knocked out in the first round, that's not the attitude you want to have. You want to have a positive one, and I think making it in does show that you've had a successful season, especially if you're measuring it kind of not on a championship level like some drivers. Let's say Kyle Larson, who does want to win a championship, but for his team, making it to the round of 8 might be a successful season for them because they're building on it. There's like a successful level that they have to reach there's like a goal, it's like baby steps. So I do think that making it is a step in the right direction for any driver who is trying to make it out there. And if you're like Logano or Kyle Busch, you better be making it, and you better be making it to Championship 4.
Absolutely. Well, the bottom spot wasn't the only area on the board that has seen some hard competition. The two top drivers in the point standings have been Kyle Busch and Joey Logano for the past few months now. However, at Darlington, Bush clinched the regular season championship. That'll give him 15 extra playoff points more than the next guy. But let's talk about Logano for a moment. We expected him to be much more competitive this season, of course, being the defending champion. He sits at just 2 wins and hasn't won since Michigan in the early summer. He struggled at Darlington. His team has been like that for the past few weeks now. What's up with the champ?
I feel like this is a point where teams understand that, hey, we've got our 2 wins. Logano has 2 wins, and Brad Keselowski, I believe, has 3 or 4 now at this point. Those guys are I think they're just hanging back. They know that they got a good shot to make it in and to move forward in the rounds, that they're saving their best equipment for those last 10 races of the season. Likewise, I know that these drivers definitely want to continue to win week in, week out, but I think from an overall perspective, for the bigger picture, they understand, and their team owners understand, to kind of preserve the best stuff for last, if you will. And I think that's what's going on here. Otherwise, you still see drivers like Kyle Busch, who also kind of hasn't been very successful. He's been winless for a couple races now, so define your measurement on that. But at the same time, you look at Joe Gibbs overall. Mm-hmm. They're actually about to win they've won pretty much all the crown jewels except for Indy, which is coming up. So if they win that, they swept all the crown jewels this season. But overall, I do think that Penske's just kind of holding on right now and saving their best for last. But you can only hold on for so long, and it could ruin your driver's momentum moving forward and the potential to gain more spots in that standings.
Well, before we move on from Darlington, Russell, you and your dad took your first trip to the Lady in Black. So I got 2 questions for you. I'm going to ask them both. You can answer them. Is the minnow pond still at the track? We talked about that last week. And 2, what was your experience like?
Yeah, that minnow pond is still there. It's actually really big, a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be like maybe the size of our studio room, but it's actually probably bigger than an entire block or 2 blocks around here in Rockingham. And they actually use that area for a landing pad for the helicopters. But that experience was awesome. Unfortunately, the rain came and it kind of messed it up a little bit. But we stuck it out for about 4 hours in the car. We kind of waited around. But before that, we had pit road access, and that was a lot of fun. I got to hang out around behind pit wall and actually see what the crew members are doing before the race starts. There's so many tires that they got back there. It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's just like tons of tires that just got lined up ready for them, and they're just like gluing the lug nuts onto it, which makes it easier for them later on when they're putting on the car.
How many tires does an average driver go through in a race?
For a cup team, for a well-funded cup team, is probably going to, they change them at regular about 4 times, so you got at least 4 sets.
Okay.
But yeah, there was also plenty of other things going on down pit road. Of course, it rained during that time as well, and it was either you go find shelter underneath the pit boxes, or you just kind of stick it out. I kind of stuck it out. Kind of regret it because I ruined my shoes a little bit, but I did actually get to watch the IndyCar race on Brad Keselowski's pit box.
Oh, that's cool.
And I got to have a little conversation with his crewmates while they were setting up some stuff. So it was pretty fun for that, and overall it was a lot of fun. But of course, being that late at night, I couldn't stick it out. I was driving back and I just could not keep up. But I got to experience a race in all different ways possible. In person, on the radio, and on TV. So I'm not sure how many people can do that.
Nice. That is the trifecta as far as keeping up with a race. All right, so let's hit the in the groove drivers for this week. Who sticks out in your mind?
For the Xfinity Series, I got to give it to Dale Earnhardt Jr., his first race in it's been over a year, over 2 years, I can't remember, but of course coming off the plane crash a couple weeks ago, he started 14th, he finished 5th, and that's a pretty strong finish. They're driving one of his dad's old cars, Pink Schemes, and really big deal. Of course, they actually technically finished 6th until Denny Hamlin's win got taken away, so it moved him up to 5th, but overall, that's really impressive for a driver who has been out of the game for a while, having to deal with a plane crash, coming back, and really not really missing the beat. And for the Cup Series, I'm going to give it to the 21 driver, Paul Menard. He started 17th, finished 9th. Driving that throwback Woods Brothers scheme was pretty cool, and he definitely finished it out in style.
Before we move on, speaking of Earnhardt, he obviously did well. I know it was at the Xfinity Series, but do you expect him to do more of these kind of spot races in the future?
I think he wants to, because I know he's mentioned plenty of times on his podcast that he would like to kind of do like 1 or 2 races, at least once a year for him. And I kind of like to see that from other retired drivers such as Tony Stewart and Jeff Gordon, just kind of doing one-off races, whether it's Cup, Xfinity, or Truck Series.
Good for the sport, too.
It is good for a sport to keep them in and to allow fans to come back and see their drivers one more time. Actually, I did get to see Jeff Gordon at Darlington. He was there, but he wasn't there in a race car, so it's a little bit different in that terms. But overall, you would like to see that for sure.
All right. Well, as we've mentioned, Indianapolis is up next on the list in the Cup Series schedule. This race will conclude the regular season. Now,
finally here.
Yes. When the 2019 rules package was announced, this track had been one on everybody's mind to see how well the cars would perform. So what are you expecting to see out of the Brickyard 400?
Based on the rules package we've seen this season, there's been a lot of side drafting going on, a lot of side-by-side action. Darlington was phenomenal in that this past weekend. I expect to see that at Indy. It's a really big track. I think it's going to play out similar to what you see on a typical plate race, which is Talladega Daytona from last year, basically. But I do expect to see a lot of side-by-side action. You might even get to see some 3-wide action on the back stretch and the front stretch. That would be awesome to see some of that. I hope we do, because I really would like to see Indy have some better racing. It has not been very great over the years since kind of that car tomorrow came in. Mm-hmm. But I do think that this year, I think we're going to have a good race here, and hopefully that will translate further into the future of Indy, because that's a really historic track. And I do like to see NASCAR continue to be there and to continue to call the Brickyard 400 a crown jewel.
Well, Indy definitely is a crown jewel, and it's with that being said, time for Track Facts, brought to you by royellow.com. Located in Speedway, Indiana, very appropriate name for the town. Indianapolis Motor Speedway was constructed in 1909 at the cost of just $3 million. That would be $73 million in today's money, a little bit different. It is the highest capacity sports venue with over 257,000 permanent seats and can actually fit 400,000 if need be.
I'm sure they're using all of that for the Indianapolis 500.
I'm sure they are. That's a ton of people. Yeah. In 1942, auto racing was actually banned in the United States because of World War II. The track became an airfield and then actually sat dormant for many years and almost became a housing development. Ooh. Can you imagine? But the track was saved and is now, of course, one of the premier motorsport tracks in the world. That is your Track Facts, brought to you by royellow.com.
Yeah, that was a pretty scary moment back then for sure for a lot of race fans. Of course, I think it was like 3 years it sat dormant. Yeah. And they finally got something going. I couldn't imagine motorsports without Indy at this point. I'm not sure if it could even reach where it is today, especially for IndyCar racing itself. But yeah, overall, that's been one of the focal points of motorsports. And definitely, like I said earlier, it's a crown jewel for NASCAR, but it's the race for IndyCar. And
yeah, I mean, if you go out on the street and ask a bunch of just, people that aren't race car fans, you say, name a couple of tracks, Indy's going to be on that list.
Indy's probably going to be like number 1, number 2, right there with Daytona. Yeah. And it's very I can't even think of other ones that somebody might say, maybe Talladega, but those are the big tracks, and Indy's really big on a worldwide spectrum.
All right. Well, with Indy coming up, before we end the show, let's get some predictions. Who you got?
Well, I said Jimmy Johnson could have a potential to win this race, but I'm not going to say he's winning it. I just don't think he's going to make it, and I think he's going to run some more bad luck. Also, we had our regular season champion crowned last week, but I think he's going to tip it off with a win. Kyle Busch is going to get it done. I think he's got 3 or 4 wins here in the last 6 years, I believe. So I don't see that changing this week. Kyle Busch knows this track very well. Of course, with the rules package, we don't know what's going to happen, but I do expect to see maybe his brother Kurt being up there battling with him, but Kyle Busch ultimately winning.
All right, there you go. Heard it here first. And that's going to do it for this edition of Ross Racing. And, of course, want to thank Richmond Senior High School football offensive coordinator Brad Denson for joining us earlier in the show. Of course, Deion Cranford, our Raider guru. That is Russell Parker. I'm Matt Harrelson. All of this, the RO Sports Show, brought to you by RO Yellow. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week, and we'll see you a week from now for more from the RO Sports Show.